And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Karen Schaeffer, who tragically passed away in a motor vehicle accident. Her spirit was promptly taken to the afterlife, where she embarked on a journey through the heavens during her near-death experience. Karen, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Karen, let's start on the day you had the accident and go from there.
All right. So, on the day of the accident, I was 24 years old. I was a new mom. So my son was about 7.5 months old. Um, this was now 28 years ago, April 25th of 96. And really, for me, my story began before the accident ever even happened. Um, I had, when my son was just anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks old, I just started back to work. Then I'd had a premonition dream, and I dreamt that I had died, and I woke up sobbing in this dream, from this dream. And I'd had a handful of premonition dreams beforehand, some other, accidents and things because I'm a teacher, things about my classes and students. And so this was such a real, vivid dream, and I was terrified. Um, and I remember talking to my mother-in-law about it at the time, and she's like, "Oh no, that's normal. Normally it's about, you fear that your babies are going to die, but maybe this is just, a type of that." And but I was really concerned, and I was very, very cautious driving, and I was looking for, this vehicle that I had seen in my dream. And after months, had passed and nothing happened, then I thought, okay, you know what? Calm yourself down. It was probably just a dream, you know? And I hadn't had anything else, like it since then. No other follow-up premonitions or anything of this happening.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you dreamt that you died from a car accident?
I did.
Okay.
So, um, and so for me, I was so careful for a long time. Well, on this day that this happened, um, I had a student that I was having trouble with at school, and sometimes to connect with kids, I was teaching high school at the time. Sometimes to connect with kids, you find things that are their interest. And he was on the baseball team, so I thought, I'm going to go home. I'm going to pick up my son. I'm going to come back. I'm going to, go and watch this baseball game, and then maybe that conversation can kind of, okay, I can get him on my side, and we can have just a better classroom environment from that. So I'm on my way home to get my son, and as I'm getting off the highway, then I could tell farther away, off the exit ramp, that the light was green. Um, and I thought, oh, all right, okay. I figured by the time I got to the light, it would be red, but it wasn't. So I made my way through the light, through the intersection, and then I was in a garden. And it was just like that. And I'm walking around in this beautiful, beautiful garden, with different pathways and just the most amazing, amazing plants that were there, flowers and trees. And there's this meadow and a lake and these Romanesque big Greek gazebos, and just it was absolutely gorgeous. And I'm walking around trying to figure out, where am I? And I'm all alone. And so it's like, okay. And I start looking, and these plants, they shimmer. It's almost like they sparkle, they sing, they have this amazing, they exuded love. It was just love and peace and calm, and it was amazing. And no matter which plant that I walked by, everything, it was all just singing and just love, love, love. And in the distance, I could see that there were other people walking and meeting others, and I'm still trying to figure out, where am I? And suddenly my guides, I had three guides walk up to me, um, and and began talking to me. And I recognized that one of them was my grandfather on my mom's side that had passed. Another one had been my uncle, my great uncle Ross, so my dad's uncle. And he had passed when I was very, very young, so I barely even knew him. And then there was a feminine guide that they said that I would remember who they were when, after I had transitioned over, and I'm like, I didn't understand at the time. And um there was that brief connection and everything, and then I'm like, well, where am I? And they tell me that I had died. And I'm like, I can't be dead. When would I have died? And they assured me that no, absolutely, that I had died, and that uh, in order to show me, in order to prove this to me, they took me to just like above the accident and re-saw the accident, almost like, it was just like the whole situation was rewound and I was watching it. And I saw this truck come and he ran a red light and he slammed into the driver's side door of my car, and I was gone. They said that there was no way that I could have survived it, and I was just like, I can't be dead. I've got my baby. My son's name is Jake, and it's like, Jake needs me, and uh, and of course, and I didn't see it as, as like myself arguing it or anything, but it was just like disbelief, like, no, this can't be happening. This can't really be happening. Um, so when they showed me the accident, I kind of seemed to settle at first, like, okay. Um, and I didn't understand, why I didn't have any memory of it. And they told me that when you sometimes with a lot of times in death, that your body, you don't need to feel that physical death. They remove your body before, or your soul, your spirit, before um anything even happens, before you feel any of that pain. And so unless it's like, it's part of like your life lessons and stuff, then and it's let's just for me, it was my son. I couldn't leave my son, and every time I would think of him, it's like, I would become very, very hysterical. So I became very upset again, and it was like suddenly they whisked me away from there and we're up in the clouds. Everything was just white. That it was actually the clouds. I just remember everything was just white. And so suddenly we're at this circular platform, and it's almost like a control station, but it's got like a window in it. And they tell me that from here that I would be able to see everything that would happen to Jacob, that I would know what his life turned out to be like, that I could follow, what was going on, that once I had crossed over completely, then I would know what was happening with all of my loved ones. And that I could be with them, and that they showed me how I could come and go um, between heaven and earth, so that I could be here with my family if I wanted to be here, but still be able to go back and forth. And um, and there were points in which, I thought about my son, I thought about my mom, and as far as my mom, then I was worried about dying, at this point about my mom, because my mom had always said that when my sister and I were little, that if anything ever happened to us, then she would just crawl into bed and never get out again. And I'm like, I can't do this to my mom. And so at that point, not hysterical, they bring me to my funeral. And this was just, it was meant to, one, show me that, look, you can be right here with with your loved ones. It was to show me that this is the way things are meant to be, that they're going to be okay, that they might be upset, but they're going to be okay. And so we walk in, and there's like these rows of pews, and the seats were full, and it was standing room only. And I'm like, I remember being surprised suddenly that, like, I never thought that I would have this many people at my funeral. Um, and we walk down this aisle. My mom is in the front on the right, on the left-hand side, is my family, and on the right-hand side was my husband and his family. And my mom was surrounded by my grandma and my sister and my dad, and then her family on either side of her. And and I had walked up to my mom, and my mom was crying. I was standing behind her, and I tried to tell her that I was okay. Mom, I'm alive. Everything is, don't cry for me. I'm good. I'm good. And every time I would try to talk to her, then she would just break down and just cry and cry and cry. And so um I realized, it seemed that because every time I talked to her, she cried harder. Then I had to step away. And so then I go over to my husband and my son, like I said, he was like 7.5 months old at the time. And he's playing, at his leg, kind of, was standing and doing some, kind of holding him. And at some point, he sits down and he's just playing. My son is just playing. And I realize that he isn't going to remember me. He isn't going to remember me at all. And he wouldn't know what I thought, what I valued. Um and I became very, very upset. It still breaks me up. Um, and so they whisked me out of there, because I was just becoming so upset. And we're suddenly in the clouds again. And now they're teaching me about the importance of this. Why is it I've got to be okay with moving on, because they have life lessons that they have to learn. There are things that Jacob has to learn without having a mother. There are things that, that my husband had to learn without having his wife and going through, and my mom, and all of these people had certain lessons. And, and so they go through and we talk about, they show me kind of Jacob's life, and Jacob was going to, being a single dad was going to be hard. And so Jacob was going to spend the majority of his young life with my in-laws. Um, and while they were fine people, it wasn't something that I wanted for him. My husband was going to get remarried, and Jake, just even though she treated him okay, it wasn't her own child. They had a child together. They were going to have a daughter. And when her daughter came along, then she treated her daughter differently than the way she treated my son. And the idea of that, was another thing that it choked me up. Um, and there were these points in which, I would get very upset thinking about Jacob and, what his life would be. And my guides were so patient, so loving. And, they didn't get upset. They just whisked me right on to something else. And, either they pulled me out of a situation or they put me back, they changed the conversation to something else or they would shift it. And so, um, they talk about, we all have life lessons and that there are ways that we learn these lessons, that even in the heavens, then there are classrooms where we learn things, where we learn basic theory and the importance, of certain understandings. And, the only thing that we don't get is, the direct experience. But by going through all of that, by learning about it, we get that initial empathy for what that feeling would be, that initial understanding of it. And there are massive libraries that we can go and we can learn. And at one point we were in this library and it was massive, stories full of books. Um, and just all these columns and rows of books of all everything that you would need to know about, the universe. Um, and Earth is just, it's a learning place, and this is where we come, but this isn't our real home. Um, and so they go through all of this with me, and so then at some point, then it gets to where now we're going to talk about my life and my experience, and so we go through what, would probably be considered the life review. And so we talk about um, uh, how I saw these images of times in my life. And while I know that we had this extensive discussion about it, there's a lot that I don't remember very much anymore. Or wasn't allowed to come back with it. But um, I remember, a time from childhood and how this group of girls that I so wanted to be friends with, and I just was never able to become, really friends with them. I was always just kind of an outsider with them. And, just it wasn't even about how they made me feel. It was about how I made them feel. It was looking at, what was my impact on others. And it wasn't a judgment. A lot of people think the life review is a judgment on who you were as a person. And it's really more like, I think I would equate it to like when athletes go back and they review, games and what did I do here and how do I make this better? And so it was more like that. It was an analysis of what my life had been and um how did I do at meeting the goals and the lessons that I was supposed to get. Um so it wasn't really about, oh, you did this wrong and you did this wrong. It was just, what did you learn from that? How did you make others feel? How did this relate to, or how well did you meet your goal of going on, of whatever the lessons were that I was supposed to get. Um, and that our life is really about showing kindness and showing love and compassion to others. Um, whether we know them or we don't know them. So it's compassion, love for all. And, anyways, at that point, that was an extensive period of time, but like I said, I don't remember it. After that, we were suddenly like, it was kind of like we're talking about these things and we're going and we were in different places. And then at some point, we end up being in this big library. And they're talking about just it's that reintegration and giving me refilling my mind of what it is to be on the other side and just helping me to remember. And that's really all that it was. It was a helping me to remember so that I can transition and shed all of my earthly, my humanity, and be this sparkly, wonderful spirit that, that we are on the other side. And so, we talked about um, pathways to heaven, religion. We talked about this hierarchy of the organization of heaven and God and angels and all of that stuff. And we talked about ghosts um and hell and what that is. And we talked about suicide and at some point, there were these shooting stars, and it's like, what are those? And um and so they told me that this is um it's our spirits that are coming back and forth from earth to the spirit realm, and that part of that, like what I was going through at the time, when we come into this world, we have to have all these blinders on, when just like astronauts going out into space, you have to have all this protective gear to come here from what we know, this expansive knowledge that we have, and um the amazing abilities, the life that we have on the other side, the love, to come here into earth, which is just heavy. There's a lot of learning, and in order to do that, we have to we have to wear this kind of protective gear, and we have to forget what life on the other side is like, because otherwise it would be too difficult. We wouldn't want to stay here. And so these shooting stars were basically that getting into your gear, it's getting out of your gear. And it was just amazing. We continue on, and we talk about, Earth and galaxies and universes and things that I had never even had any idea of. And now, I see some things in science today that are dealing with that. And it's amazing to me, because knowing that there's these other galaxies, these other universes and stuff that are out there, and um uh I don't know. We talked at one point about my grandparents on my dad's side, my grandma and grandpa Garner, that they'd passed long before, when I was very, very young. And so I had wanted to know, when can I see them? And they were on another planet at the time. They were living out another life. And but they're like, but don't they'll be here any moment. And it's like, how can they be here any moment? And they're like, time is just so drastically different, that what's going on in their world is just, it's a blink of an eye. And I wish that I had seen them before I came back, but I didn't. But that's okay. One day I will. Um, and so we just talk about how, we talked about how time is relevant to the location that you're at, that spirit time is master time. And that time can be manipulated. Whereas here, everything is just seems, like everything just goes very rote, and, it seems long, it seems forever while we're here, but it really isn't. It's over very, very quickly. We talked about wormholes that can lead us from one realm to another, almost like, and I don't know if that's connected with black holes, but there are these passageways that are through the universe that we get from one place to another. We talked about Earth being an important classroom, and how it's almost um, like a college class, that, it's your suit, you've got your levels, that we come back and forth here, even though a lot of people don't like to come back and forth. We come back and forth because we have these lessons that we keep learning, so that we can progress in our spirit realm. To some degree, it mirrors like what we're doing here. You had your leader, and everyone has their job, and in order to progress in the spirit world, you need to have various levels of learning and understanding of emotions and feelings and just experiences. And so we come here to learn that. And, just like in any kind of learning, we don't start out at the top level. We start out at the baby level, we start out at kindergarten, and we keep progressing. And so we keep coming back, so that we can get deeper levels of understanding. But Earth was or is the most challenging of any of the realms. That even though we can have these lifetimes and these experiences in these other places, it doesn't give the same experience, the same challenge that we get here. We talked about soul groups and how Brad and I and much of my family and and his family, we had come together as a group to learn these experiences together. Um, and that we've done this for for many lifetimes. And that often, people will stay in their soul groups, but sometimes, there's some switching in and out. And we had talked about uh, uh, there was a girl that was there, and at the time she looked like she was probably about like 9 or 10, dark hair. She kind of had a veil over her. She was all in white. Um, and uh, my understanding was that she was supposed to be my daughter. She was part of my soul group, and she was happy to see me. She was happy that I had returned. But she was supposed to be my daughter, but my son came in her place instead because she had decided that she didn't want the challenges of that initial first, coming in. There were problems between my family and my husband's family. Um, and uh, and so Jacob came in from a different soul group in order to try and help solve those problems. And in some ways, he did. Um, but when we talked about Jacob not being in my, in this group and understanding how he came along, then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, Jacob, all this stuff that I learned, I'm like, I'm going through it all. And it's like, I'm learning and I'm understanding and, and I was feeling myself lighter and lighter and lighter. And then thinking of Jacob again was like, oh my God, Jacob, I can't. And they calm me down. This time we go into Jacob's life. What is Jacob's life going to be like? What are his lessons? The fact that he learned these lessons, but now what's he going to do with it? Why is this important for him to not have you? And so they showed me him getting married and having three children and that, that it isn't so much about what he is doing, it's the impact that he's going to have on future generations. Because there would be problems in the United States that would, um, and I think sadly we're seeing some of those today, the problems in the United States that will eventually start breaking us up. And Americans, we give up our power, we give up our rights so that we let our leaders just make all the rules. We give up so much of of what our rights are. And so at some point our constitution is nothing at all like what we have now, and we're no longer a democracy. And at some point one of Jacob's great grandchildren becomes an important leader to restructure the US. And and it's a very dangerous, it would be a very dangerous thing for him to do. But um part of Jacob living with my father-in-law was my father-in-law loved history, had a very, very strong love for our country. And so he instilled a lot of that in Jacob, and as Jacob would grow up with him. And so Jacob's love of history, would then transfer to his children and and down. And so that kind of helped me, help calm me that, okay, seeing where this was going. We talked about so many different things that there's so much that I don't even recall. Sometimes I don't even recall that, like I couldn't even tell you unless you had a question. If you asked me a question, then I could say, oh yeah, no, I know this, but it would have nothing to do with anything that, that I tell you. Um, at some one point we get to this point of no return. It's just we're like right there at the edge of the veil, and I can't go. I can't leave Jacob. And and I was so broken up, and I was sobbing hysterically. And all of a sudden, I feel this immense warmth. Something like just picks me up and either has me in their hands, or they've wrapped a wing or something. I don't know, I don't know what it is, but just this immense, I am just enveloped in this love and peace. And I stopped crying. And whether I couldn't tell you whether this was God, whether this was like Jesus or another enlightened being or something, someone who was at a much higher level. And they tell my guides to let me return. And my guides say, she's almost here. We're almost there. And and they're like, no, no, no. And there was a little bit of argument there. Um, and and it is said, let me go, because otherwise I am so connected. My feelings towards Jacob had the chance of making me lost. That I would come down, I would use my ability, and I would have used my ability to come down here, and I would have stayed with Jacob. And I probably would not have gone back and forth. I would have just wanted to stay here. And the longer that we're here in the earth realm as spirits, not going back and forth, we lose sight of our way home. Not that we can't ever get home, but we just lose sight of it, and it takes us, it could be a long time. That's part of the reason for ghosts. Um, and so, um, although my guides were, you know, felt differently, we're suddenly now at a podium, and there's a big book on this podium. And so they're now working on rearranging my life and my family's lives, and so that they can reintegrate me into it. And so they're working on changing this timeline so that they can fit, Jacob's lessons and how he's now going to learn things with me being back in his life. And so they alter that, and they alter Brad's, and they alter anyone, who I would be having that connection with. And then it gets down to, well, I let me stop for just a moment. When we talk about my son, especially, they tell me that there are certain things that he has to learn, regardless who his mom is. Even if I come back, there were some experiences that I did not like seeing, from this other woman, and from his life experience with my in-laws and with my husband. And he was gonna have to go through those, even if I was there. And it's like, that's fine. At least it'll be me there with him. And so they go through all of that, and then now it's time for them to work on me. And I had already completed what I needed to complete. And so what do I want to do this time around? And so then I'm asked, do I want to take a different path? Do I want to be more religious? Do I want to have, any spiritual gifts? Do I want, just all of these different things? What, do I want to have any certain, do I want to move somewhere? Do I want to do this? And you know what? And my focus, I just wanted to be back. I was fine with my life. I'm just let me go back. That's all I wanted. And so I didn't take any question. I didn't ask for anything to be any different. And so they showed me at times as they're working on my life. I remember seeing certain points. I was teaching high school. I think I said that earlier. I was teaching high school at that time, and I saw myself working with really young kids. Now, when I was really young, I wanted to work with second grade. And at this point, teaching high school, I realized, oh no, I only want to teach high school. And and so I saw me working with younger kids, and there were a variation of ages that was in there. And I saw me having abdominal problems that would require surgery. I saw myself divorcing, and being alone. I saw a wedding of a young bride that I knew. And I'm in the room with her as people are putting on her veil and helping to zip her up and get ready. And I'm just looking at her with love, and just awe. And then um And then we had talked about, how I would go when, when it was my time to return. And and I told him that I wanted to be something, fast and painless. Um, and and I said it was fine the way that I had gone this time. And so saw another accident that, and knock on wood, whatever, I honestly hope it won't be this way, but, I saw this accident in the future. Um, and while I'm still a teacher and, um, you know, I see myself incapacitated. It was something that happened with me. Like I feel pressure in my chest and I pass out and I caused this accident. And the idea of that, I hate this idea. I so hope that it won't, but I don't have control over it. Um, Other than taking care of my health and doing things like that. But, and I worry, and I'm asking them, whoa, so I get this other car, I know I'm gone. And then I want to know about, well, what about these other people that are in this car? And they won't tell me anything. And it's like, do they live? Are they hurt? And they just tell me everything's as it should be. And I keep asking more questions. Well, wait a minute. No, when is this? Everything's as it should be. It's like, so I got no answers on that. Um, I was told that I wouldn't be allowed to remember most of the information. So when I actually came back into my body, then I forgot most of it. And it sounds like I remembered a lot, but it really is just, just a little bit of it. Um, and I remember them, telling me that we get above the accident site and they tell me that they won't be able to um, heal all the problems, because this was supposed to be an unsurvivable accident. And so I will still have some pain and everything. And it's like, that's okay. I will tolerate that. I'm okay with that. I just want to go home. They tell me that my return when I come back the second time, that there's no going back, that I won't get a second chance, or a third chance, whatever it would be. And I'm like, I'm okay, Um, I did ask some questions on, trying to know when will this happen? How will I know? We're giving some milestones, that I can look for to know, and they wouldn't give me any kind of information as far as like when my time is up. And so I'm literally like just above them. I agree to it all, and it's like a slide, and then I'm back in my body. And and I wake up in my car and um and I am dazed and like, where am I? And I'm looking around and I see right here is the headlight of the truck that hit me. I'm in a lot of pain. There's some little smoke that's coming from my steering wheel from, I don't even, at the time I didn't know where it's coming from. I just see this little bit of smoke. And I'm just looking around and there's some people that are pounding on the windows. And I realized at that point that, whoa, I've been in an accident. And my first thought is, whoa, this is what it's like to be in an accident. And um, and so then I'm hearing this pounding, and I look at them and they're like, we can't open the door. And I remember reaching over and unlocking the door for them. And then this girl comes in and it was this girl and her mom. And at the time though, I don't know if it's from my head injury, the fact of kind of, I don't know what, from being in heaven. And literally this girl, she was like my angel. There were times that I wanted to just just close my eyes and just fall asleep, and my head hurt so badly. And she kept asking me these questions, and they were like these very grounding questions, and she would ask me, and I was worried about my son. And I was asking about Jacob, where's Jacob? Where's Jacob? And at some point I tell them, in this confusion, I tell them that he's with his grandparents, but I'm worried about, where is he? Where is he? And I started to give them my phone number. And then I realized, oh wait, that's not their number. And then I gave them the number to my in-laws, to let them know that I was in this accident. Um, and then the next thing I know, the fire department is there and they're pulling me out of my car, um, and I'm on my way to the hospital, um, and that was touch and go. I remember hearing them say at one point, she's not with us. We're losing her. Um, and then I remember waking up in my hospital bed. So, and that is pretty much where life moves on.
Karen, thank you for sharing your experience with us. One thing I find fascinating is that it was so difficult to detach from this earthly life and remember who you really are.
You know, at the time, I thought that it was that my son needed me. It wasn't that my son needed me, it was that I needed my son. I couldn't leave because at that point in my life, um, Jacob was the best thing that I had ever done. Um, I think that, you know, I was a good kid. I had friends. It was a good life. Um, but it wasn't, I didn't have that self-love for me that I needed. And Jacob is what I felt made my life worthwhile. He was the best thing that I had ever created, ever done. It was a miracle to have him, and that uh I created this. And I think any parent, when they have their child, that is the feeling that they have. But um, for me, he was my life, you know, and and that's why I couldn't give that up, you know. And I think that if I had, and this is of course after years, I mean, it's been 28 years looking back on this, I think that if I had more self-love for me, and respect for who I was, I probably would have been able to detach faster. So that's one of the things that people will ask me about. I've gotten, in the past, I've gotten, emails, or I've talked to people who have, like, my mom or dad, died, or, so and so, they left, and why wouldn't they have fought for me? Why wouldn't they have come back? And it's like, and that makes me feel bad that that isn't the case at all. Literally, if I had felt better about who I was, if Jacob wasn't just my end all be all, then I would have been gone too. Because I was right there, and all they're talking, all they're remembering, and going through everything, it just takes you right there. You're just losing, your humanity. And once you pass over, you see the big picture of it all. Here, and even still, before we cross over, that veil, then we're still holding on to this human insight into things that are happening. And once we cross over, we see why everything is happening. We see the whole big picture on, what the reasons are, and we don't feel bad for the experiences that humans are having here, that our loved ones are having, because they're supposed to go through this. That it isn't intentionally, this isn't torture, this is, they're choosing, we're all choosing to go through this and go through this pain. And it's one of watching us with happiness, that, that we're dealing with this. And so, um, but I wasn't at that point that I could let myself go yet.
Are there
So, and people will say too, I'm so sorry. People will say too that, um, that they see that I argued, through it. There was this one article that was written about me, how, I was a Karen, to to God and my guides. And it's like, no, I don't see it that way. My mom says, oh, but you did argue to come back. It's like, I wasn't really arguing to come back. I was arguing. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't, it was just, I couldn't let go.
are there any elements of the future that you witnessed come to pass since you've been back?
What I saw of the well, yes, to some degree. As far as, like, if I look at my own personal life, like I said, at the time I was teaching high school, and very shortly after, I started working my way down, and I was a third grade teacher for the majority of my career. And then I went down to first grade, and I have and working my way back up, and that was kind of like the elements of what I had seen of my life. I never would have thought that, that I would have gone down into the lower grades, again. So personally, that is, I have seen that. Some of the elements of my son, and the struggle and the sadness that he had throughout his life, I still see that sadness. I see that sadness in him. And, it isn't something that I don't know how to fix that for him. He just has a sadness. And uh Jacob's different than my other family. There is sometimes about, he's just he just stands out in a whole different way. And I'm not saying that as a mother, that, oh, he's better in any way. I mean, sometimes there's like this, how do I explain it? Um, when you are, you have your clique and you all get along, and, we come in at these soul groups, and he's this outsider to that soul group, and the way that we normally do things isn't the way that he does things. Um, I see some of that kind of play in the mix. Um, he certainly had, the love of history from his grandfather, even though his grandfather didn't raise him the same way. As far as you like history, like national history, I think I'm seeing those things come. Um, because one of the things that I saw for our history is that not only, will we break up, I saw, as far as like the United States itself, pretty much from the Mississippi West, um, I was a history teacher, so when sometimes when I think about things, I think about, some of the historical things that have happened. So, like, I would have said, it was almost like Louisiana Purchase area. That area was like completely dark. California was gone. Um, Arizona, a little bit of Colorado, New Mexico. Those were no longer part of the U.S. Those were part of Mexico. Florida was no longer part of the U.S. Um, there were large, like half the United States is just like black. It's just gone. I don't know if it was gone. I don't know if it was just uninhabited. If, I don't know what happens with it, but there was just like, it was like lifeless. Um, and then the US is just really such a small portion, almost that, um, New England and middle states kind of area. And we're not a world power anymore, and we're not a superpower in any way, and just really, really struggling. And I saw that there were times in which, we're going to have, some violent, rough times ahead. And I hate to say that, I mean, I see those things coming to light, you know, I see we're headed in that kind of direction. Um, and and it's scary. It's scary living through it. I thought that I saw that this would be far off in the future. But I certainly never expected that, that I would live through any of it, and my kids would. I think that we're on a dangerous path, and and maybe it's meant to be. Um, I mean, certainly not all countries, Roman Empire fell. So, um, so it's things like that that I see that are kind of coming.
You mentioned that the most important thing in life is compassion and love. Have you implemented those into your life and changed in any way?
I think that's a really good question. Um, um, I mean, one, we're all human, so we do our best. I think that I try as much as I can. Um, I try and help others. I think part of my teaching is helping and showing compassion, and um, it's not just about learning. It's about being kind to one another, and we all need to learn that. Um, as grown-ups, we struggle with that. Have I changed? Um, Honestly, I was a good person, before all this happened. Um, has it changed? I think my thoughts on it, beforehand, I wouldn't have thought about, oh, it's, life is about love and compassion, and, and being kind to each other. That's just the way you are. But now I mean, I have that very conscious, um, knowledge of, wait, do things in kindness. There was a point in my divorce, quite honestly, that, you know, um, I was a little mean in some of the things that I did, and I believe in signs. I think we get signs all the time, from the heavens, from our loved ones and stuff. I was in a store, and they've got these little signs and everything. They have the little sayings and everything on them. And when I was going out shopping, so many of them were like, "Be kind, be kind." And finally, one day, it's like, okay, this is my message, be kind. And that kind of changed my strategy, and how I went about, finishing the rest of my divorce out. Um, and and I try and remember those things, but we all get caught up because we're human. So there's no way that I'm perfect. Um, but I try to consider what others' thoughts and feelings are, and when I'm listening to others who talk about problems, um, you know, I remind them, as often as I can, to show compassion, to think about what the other side is going through, and I think we could solve a lot of our world problems if we just had some compassion for people, because we don't know the problems that they're going through.
Do you think that that's the ultimate lesson or the ultimate realization we're supposed to have while being here?
Yes, love one another, love ourselves. Um, that everything that we do, it isn't learning math, it isn't learning, you know, how to manage our finances or anything like that. It's about, how do we get along with each other? How do we have that love and compassion for someone when they're absolutely driving us nuts? You know, when someone is acting, like a bull in a china shop, um, how do you how do you find that compassion and love to let them be who they are? Um, or even to stop and say, "Hey, do you need something? How can I help you?" And we don't do that. And so I think all of these things, I mean, we can look historically. I mean, people absolutely hate Hitler. And with everything, with the atrocities that Hitler had committed, and the German army, um, why? You know, God still, and people get angry when I say this. You know, People want Hitler to be burning in hell. But he's got his chance also, just like all of us, to redeem himself for any of those atrocities. Why did this happen? How do we get past that? How do we come to love and accept that this guy was hurting on his own? He had mental issues. How do we get past? How do we see that he's not him? He's a spirit, he's just like all the rest of us, and find a way. And certainly we can't let those types of atrocities happen, as best we can. But when they do happen, how do we react to that? How do we help others? How do we help others get through the most difficult parts of their life? Losing others, I mean, so many people, they lose their families, they lose their children. How do we help them? And I think everything boils down to we help them with love.
Can you talk a little more about what you learned on how heaven and hell is organized, and God and ghosts and stuff like that?
Mhm. Like if we were talking about like the organization of heaven, you've got, God, the creator. And then underneath that was like these enlightened masters, whether that was like Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad, and people who don't even have names, just they've reached this level of understanding. Um, they're right there. And then there's this level of all of these other people, spirits that and the things, the jobs that they do. And we get down to angels. And in those angels, there's their own hierarchy there as well of, your protector status, and all the angels that intervene, and you have your guardian angels. And then you got these other jobs, and then down, then you have your guides, and your guides can be, they could be angels, they could be loved ones, someone that's going to be there, someone you may not even know, at least in this life, in human life. And so um you take those jobs, because we all have a purpose, on the other side. Um, and then, and we leave our post, and we come back here so that we can learn more, so that we can progress and go, work our way into these higher realms. And we don't have to keep working up, to keep spiraling our way to top. We can stop at any point and say, okay, you know what, this is where I want to be. And then maybe, million, zillion years, go on, and then you decide you want to do something else. But as far as um, hell is more of a personal construct. It's something that we put ourselves through, that when we go through our life review and we see, maybe damages that we've caused, things that went wrong, then this becomes something in which, we almost put ourselves in this timeout, and we can become very, very hard on ourselves on what we do. And so um, sometimes before a spirit is able to come back and correct their mistakes, or try and correct their mistakes or their learning, then they need like a timeout. Sometimes it's a self-imposed timeout that, they're kind of lost in all the destruction and all the things that they've done. Um, if their life is taken, and they haven't come, on their own, sometimes that in itself, can be something that can throw you into this personal hell. But it isn't something, it's not like I was raised Southern Baptist, and it's very fire and brimstone, and at least it was. I don't know anymore, but I don't believe it's changed. But um, you know, this idea that there's this fiery hell that you're going to go to and wrap there forever, that just isn't. God isn't like that. God is loving, and God, um uh just like a parent, we don't want to see our kids suffering. But we also have to have some tough love and let them, deal with their issues for a little bit. We can't always rescue them. And so, but he's always there. And that's the same. So as a parent, we would always be there. Um, uh, hell is possible to get out of. You can, um, I don't know. There are ways. Um, you asked about ghosts. Ghosts are, part of that is people who have come and they have stayed. They couldn't get rid of their human weight. They chose to come here. They stay with their loved ones. There are a lot of different things. Sometimes what we see as ghosts really aren't like stuck. They're not stuck here, and none of it. I mean, they could make their way back, but they don't see the light, or they won't see the light to leave. We have, like our spirits that come and go. So not all ghost or supernatural stuff are necessarily just stuck spirits, that they are our loved ones who are coming back and forth, and sometimes some of them are rather playful, and and they'll do things, they'll knock things over, or whatever. Um, I was told that there are a lot of different types of spirits that come into this realm. So, um, we typically call any kind of that paranormal type stuff, to be a ghost. But it may not necessarily be like a stuck ghost.
Can you talk a little more about the control station, the circular platform, and can you interact with people from there in their dreams?
I don't recall that. I don't know that information. Um, it was something in which, like, they showed me that that we can literally, we can come and we can be right there, and and we can, spirit can communicate with us in our dreams. That's often the easiest way for us to communicate with spirit, is through our dreams, especially if they're so um apprehensive about having allowing spirit in their life. A lot of people are very scared of their loved one even possibly sitting next to them, just that fear of the unknown. But as far as the control station, it seemed to be, um I mean, we weren't there for a long, long time, but it seemed to be just a place where um we could we could choose, like, okay, you know what, I want to go to them when they're 28, I want to go to them when they're 52, and we can see their whole life. I don't know all the things that could happen at this control station, but it was pretty amazing.
Karen, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
I am.
What's the best way to contact you?
um by email. Do you want me to just give you my email? And
Sure.
okay. um Let me see which of my emails would be the better one to go to. Let's go to Karen, Karen, dot phxspi at gmail.com.
Do you have anything that you're working on that you want people to know about?
Anything that I'm working, no, I mean, um, anything that I'm working that I want people to know about. Uh, No, no, I can't say. It's not like I'm writing a book or anything. I mean, people always tell me, you know, write a book, write a book. I don't feel like I'm called to do that yet. Maybe one day, but I don't feel like when I feel something, I feel it here. And it's like, okay, I am supposed to do it. I don't feel that for that. I am working on developing my gifts better. As far as I do have some psychic abilities. I don't do readings. I mean, I do readings, but I don't. Um, it's just more like as it comes. Sometimes the information is there, and sometimes it's not.
Like a download?
I wouldn't say. I don't know if I see it like that. It's almost like it gets whispered in my ear. And sometimes the information is just there, like I know something about a person. I wouldn't say that it's like a download, but it's just suddenly there. Sometimes I will get messages from the other side, from loved ones or something to give to somebody. Um, I think that so much of my life is busy that I don't put a lot of effort into developing it. And that's kind of like the next part of my life is the direction that I want to go. I am part of a paranormal group that we go out and we do ghost hunts um, uh, and I find that one of the things that is most helpful to me, I mean, it's always interesting to go through and do that. Um, I will get images of people and why, why certain things are happening. And I find that what I love most about doing that isn't even just the looking for evidence. It is helping people. um, that's what I love the most is helping to calm people's fears. People are so scared of the supernatural and so scared of ghosts because they don't know what it is and everything is a poltergeist or it's demonic activity and it really isn't. And I think some of the cases that I've gone on that have meant the most and stuck with me the most were the ones where it was family trying to let their loved one know that they were okay and they were there with them. Um, so we had this one case where um it was a husband and a wife and they were having a child that she was pregnant and she was due within just a couple of months and they were concerned because they would have things just fly off their shelves and their alarm clock went flying across the room one day and these things were terrifying them and we went in um uh and I wasn't getting anything throughout it and very little were we picking up on equipment and stuff and at some point I don't even know I had asked that if they had had a loved one who had just passed within like the last year and their father had passed away. The guy, I think it was the guy's father, had passed away like 6 months before, and this is when these things started happening. And it makes me think about when I was on the other side. That was the thing that I wanted I wanted my mom and my family to know most. I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't cry for me. Don't shed those tears because I'm not gone. I'm right here. I'm right beside you. I see everything going on. And um and so once I had talked to this guy about this, that, I think this is your dad. And I mean, and I had a full blown, I had a whole, I cried through talking to him and share different things that I was picking up. And I said, you know what, talk to him, talk to him when you see these things. Okay, Dad, I reckon, thanks for being here with us. They didn't have any more problems after that. Those are the things that I absolutely love about about like paranormal investigations is that helping people, helping to connect the spirit world and our world and knowing that we're really this isn't anything to fear. And the reason why we do fear it is because it's simply the unknown. And I still get scared. There are things that I get scared about. And it's really silly. I still have this slight, fear of the dark. And I know there's nothing to fear. It's just that unknown. So what do I want people to know? I don't, you know what I want people to know that and it isn't even about me. It's about as what I want people to take away from my experience is that God is love. Everything is love. That um our angels, the afterlife, our home, it's forgiving, it's understanding that, to just be kind and compassionate to each other, to have a heart, to help others, to treasure every single day. And this, I remember I look at it now, it was really super silly. When I turned 20, I was so upset when I turned 20 because I'm like, I'm no longer a teenager, I'm getting old. These are the kinds of things I remember my mom crying, when she turned 30. And people do this all the time. They're so upset on how old they're getting. And today I have a whole different take on it. Every day is a gift. We're not here for that long. It seems like we are, but we're not here for that long. Every single day is a gift, no matter whether it's good or it's bad. There's something that we can take from it. And treasure that. Treasure the time with that you do have with your family, because literally any moment it could be gone. And so treasure the lessons that are here. Um, I think of anything that I want people to get from my experiences is those things, and that as far as believing, near-death experiences or anything that they hear, I really, people should go with their gut. What feels right for them, because we're all on a different path, and what feels right for them means that's their path, that's the path that they're taking. If it feels completely wrong, then ignore it. That's not meant for you. That's not meant to be part of your path right now. If it's something that challenges you and really brings up some crazy feelings, whether it's anger or confusion, that might be something to look into. Maybe this is where your lesson is. Um, and so whether it's my experience or anyone else's or anything that someone experiences in life, if it doesn't feel right, if you don't agree with it, dump it. I don't care whether people believe my experience or not. This is what happened to me. It has impacted my life every single day since my experience. My life is definitely different because of it. I don't think I'm a better person because of it. It's impacted my life differently because of it. And so sorry, I realize I'm saying all these just take what rings true in your heart. That's it.
Karen, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.